Hello. This video is the third episode of a series dedicated to Medtner's Night Wind Sonata. If you have arrived here without watching the first episodes, I would suggest you do, for you might otherwise be a little lost. The last video had brought us up to the second subject of the sonata. We are now going to have a close look at it, which will take us to the end of the exposition. We have seen that so far there was in the music a certain restlessness, an underlying agitation. So the law of contrasts in sonata form would lead us to expect the second subject to provide a safe haven where we can enjoy a moment of peace. And this is exactly what Medtner provides here. To maximize this contrast, Medtner has gone for a chordal or choral type of writing, with a static rhythm. Those two elements give a feeling of security and solidity. One might be tempted to draw an analogy with the bar chord, for example. Or even, once again, we could refer to the Schumann First Sonata, which also has a second subject based on chordal writing, creating a similar effect. But the interesting thing here is again the rhythm. One might have expected Medtner to go back to 4 beats a bar. 5 beats creates a dissymmetry, and that kind of an unbalance is good if you are looking for a restless atmosphere, as in the first subject. If you want to convey peace, you might look for symmetry and harmony, and 5 beats a bar doesn't seem a terribly good idea. So it is one of the small miracles of this sonata that its second theme seems to be able to bypass what could have been a major impediment. I am not entirely sure how he achieves this, but I think one possible answer is that he succeeds in blurring sense of a bar line, so that most of the time we actually don't really feel the 5 beats anymore. If one looks, for example, at the first half of the theme, it is already not so clear. If we follow the curve of the music, what we hear is a group of 6 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, followed by a group of 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, which already breaks the sense of the bar line. It works a little bit like an enjambment in a poem, cutting across the bar line. But beside the rhythm, what makes this phrase so deeply satisfying is its melodic curve. If you pay attention, you will see that it creates a tidal motion, which gradually decreases until it comes to a point of rest, reaching high to the top F sharp, then lower, then less, then even lower, until it rests. When this tide cannot decrease any further, it naturally rises again. The introduction of a Sicilian rhythm, Sicilian, helps to propel the music forward, to give a sense of forward motion, which was completely absent from the first part of the phrase. In the reverse process, the melody will now gradually expand upwards until it reaches the same high note once more, only to start decreasing again. And we come back to our initial point. At this point, you may remember what I said in the previous video about the material in this work, which tends to be exposed twice. This theme is no exception. The antecedent will be restated with the introduction of inner voices, which takes away some of the statism of the first occurrence. Now, the consequent makes use of the canon technique, and it is worthy of notice because it is so beautiful. So, which sounds dry without the accompaniment, but if we put them both together, then this will propel the music forwards and lead us somewhere else altogether, to the first intimation of something important in the sonata. Up to this point, the dominant emotional feature of the movement has been a certain anxiety, a certain restlessness, to which the second subject brought some release. So there has been peace, but there hasn't been the more active, the more dynamic form of it, which would be joy. Yet, in the course of the movement, you will see paroxysms where this feelings becomes positively transcendent. It does remind us of Nietzsche's Zarathustra at his most exalted, a supra-abundance of strength. We haven't quite reached these heights yet, but there is a shift in the emotional world of the piece. Let us listen to it. So when this outburst settles, bringing back the idea of the wind once again, we hear this little phrase, another of these seemingly anodyne motivic cells that will soon reappear in a different guise. So as always, take note. On its own, it sounds like the accompanied. By now, I hardly need to tell you that this motif will be stated twice. Now we have here a little transition where the right hand, which is doing the wind, competes with the left hand, which is emitting a sort of a plaintive melody. And the interesting feature here is that for the first time, Medtner doesn't stick to the 3+2 rhythm. He goes for 2+3. So 1, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So here we find again the motifs that we just encountered. Now, we arrive at something which at first glance looks very much like a new and substantial idea. If this were the case, it would put more burden on the structure, which is already dilated to breaking point. And although Medtner in this sonata is certainly ambitious, he is not a fool. So listen to it. have focused on my left hand, you may have detected that the bass note plays some sort of melody. And by now realize that this is nothing more than the second subject once more. We will not, however, go through the whole phrase this time. Once we reach the third bar, we get stuck in a loop for a considerable time, repeating with ever increasing intensity the same motif. I'll play from here. Repeat the same little motifs that we heard, this time in a sort of moment of downright ecstasy. Repeat it, so once on the left, once on the right hand. And at this moment the music seems to lose control of itself. The paroxysm, the first really truly high summit of the movement. It is interesting that the first subject ended up in a kind of catastrophic where the second subject seems to reach some such heights of spiritual bliss. It tells us something about the emotional scope of the work, that we have gone to such extremes, and this so early on in the work. One can argue that this may actually become a serious structural problem as the work goes on. Having said so much so early in the piece, where is he going to go? Has he misjudged the proportions of the architecture he has been creating? This is something we will examine in later videos. And you will see that the answer is not black and white. For now, we must get back to this moment of ecstatic joy, and you may not be too surprised to know that Medtner is stating it twice. Now, this might have been extremely risky. Theoretically, the stronger, the more theatrical an idea is, the less it will bear being restated, for the sense of shock or surprise should necessarily diminish with every reiteration. Yet in this context, the repetition works. It acts as though the feeling is so strong that a single utterance cannot possibly exhaust it, so that it has to burst out once more. I'll play from here. After this, we simply have a long coda. The purpose of it is simply to dispel, to lose the energy which has been accumulated and prepare for the development. It is a long coda because we have been so high up that we need time to get down. Some kind of wake-up call. The music is in danger of losing itself and stopping altogether. And we get that trill, that dissonant trill. It acts in the music like an alarm clock, urging us to action. And the music acts accordingly. It bursts out once again, giving you the cell that you by now know well, which announces transition. It burst with a certain laziness, but nonetheless the crisis has been averted, and we are on the move once again, where too will be the subject of our next episode. Thanks for watching.